Well, friends, in our previous session, we saw the definition of comedy, the basic understanding of comedy, its comparison with Hindi cinema. Then we talked about Greek comedy, how in three different ages the Greek comedy developed, old, middle and new, and we discussed old comedy at length. Right? Now, in this session today, we shall have the discussion on middle comedy, new comedy, and something about English comedies. Starting with the very basic, very definition of comedy, its etymology, to the development in English, development of English comedies. This entire is your very first topic, origin and development of comedy. Clear? So now let us move on. Middle comedy came to be written from say 400 to 323 BC. It was a shift from the old comedy because the very subject matter treated in the middle comedy was different. In old comedy, there was social and political satire. In middle comedy, there is a mock reenactment of myths. We had discussed that old comedy was original. It was a purely an imaginative work of the writers because whatever they observed in society, in the polity of their time, they reflected in their writings. But the writers of middle comedy, they took the source of the subject matter from folklores or myths or legends. Though it was concerned with the socio-political concerns of the time, but it was less direct in comparison to the subject matters of old comedy. Middle comedy had not much interest in daily life, and it marks a shift from confrontation and topical humor to mythological burlesque. The satiric tone that came to be introduced in the old comedy is continued in the middle age also. That's why a gently satiric observation on the contemporary domestic life we find also in the middle age comedy. In our discussion of old comedy, we had seen that it was still at a very primary stage. The form comedy was just a beginning. Writers were still not well versed with the writing of comedy, and that's why there were some loopholes, either in characters or in plot construction or in dialogues. When we see middle comedy in Greek, then the characters are fully developed. There is a fine rise of every character and their personality. Two prominent dramatists, two major dramatists of the middle comedy are Antiphanes and Alexis. But their works do not survive now. In old comedy we had Aristophanes, who wrote 40 comedies, and out of 40, 11 survive. Frog, Klaus and Lysistrata. These were the three best known comedies by Aristophanes in old comedy. In middle comedy we have Antiphanes and Alexis, but there is not a single work by any of the writers available to us now. That is all about middle comedy. And now we come to the last age of Greek comedy, that is new comedy. Again we have a major shift from old and middle comedy so far as the subject matter of new comedy is concerned. It is less obscene. A refinement in language is noticed when we reach the age of new comedy. There is a polish. Grammatically, syntactically, the language is improved. The sentence patterns are more structured. New comedy majorly concentrated on everyday life, everyday situation. It focused on the family life and family relations as its subject matter. Mainly, it talked about family matters with complications in love relationships. Out of the three ages of Greek comedies, old, middle and new, it was in new comedy that love as the theme was introduced. Love as the theme was introduced for the first time in new comedy. And it is in this way that it marks a shift from other two ages of Greek comedy. Middle Age comedy observed a mock reenactment of myth. So there must be supernatural or heroic or quasi-divine characters in the middle comedies. But because new comedy focuses on family relationships and family love, there is no supernatural or heroic overtone in new comedy. It is genial and mildly philosophical reflection of human situations. Whatever the topsy-turviness, whatever the negative turns in human situations are dealt with philosophically and in a gentle tone by the characters. Now, in my introduction to comedy, I had said that though it is a comedy, the conflicts are likely in every kind of play. But a conflict, when is met with a fine, happy solution, when a good resolution is brought out, then it is a happy ending play, and that is why it is a comedy. If it would have been a tragedy, then there won't be a happy ending. It will all end in death and murder and violence and all that. Right? So, there is a conflict, there is a trouble, there are ups and downs in comedy also. More so, we are talking about new comedy. So, there is a trouble with husband and wife relationship. There is a conflict between father and son, so far as winning the heart of the lady is concerned. But all the problems, all the difficulties are always solved in a happy way, in a gentle and mild way. Characters are placed in difficult situations throughout the course of their life, and sometimes they suffer because of their own failings, because of their own weaknesses. But ultimate decision is left on to the characters only. So the rise of the character is marked by the character's individual moral choice. You might be aware about the concept of free will in Christianity. There is a trace of that particular concept here, that God gives you both the ends open. God shows you both the ways. God gives you many directions to go, but it is always character's moral conscience that determines which path to choose. So it is like that. Though there is a crisis, though there is a conflict, and though the hero falls for his own fault and failings, but ultimately the rise of the character depends on what path he chooses, how morally righteous conduct he follows, right? And stock characters were of course part of the old comedies as well, but we meet many stock characters in the new comedy phase. Now, what is a stock character? So sometimes there is one character who represents the whole class. For example, a witty servant. A servant is actually supposed to be very docile and meek, submissive, not taking interest in any of the family talks and family matters. But the servant that you have in the new comedy is very intelligent, shrewd and clever. So gathers the details, gathers the secrets of the family, and then in a tricky way discloses them to the chief, to the head of the family, to earn his or her own benefits. So that kind of, then sometimes a shrewd heroine, that is also a stock character. Then merchant, say for example, then Millie merchant, a very cunning merchant who would earn money by wrong strategies. So these are the examples of stock characters which were frequent in the new comedies. And these stock characters are also adopted by Shakespeare. So servant class that is represented in Shakespeare's plays, then these fools and clowns, these are all the examples of stock characters in English comedies. Chorus, we discussed about chorus in our old comedy discussion as well, and you already know the role of chorus in drama. So chorus, which was an integral part of the comedies in old comedy, when we come to new comedy, it becomes less important. Chorus that used to give the preamble, that used to bridge the gap of different acts and different scenes. The chorus that used to conclude the play, the performance, and give a message at the end. This role of chorus is reduced when we come to new comedy. And chorus appears only periodically as a small band of musicians or dancers. So their role remains confined to entertainment only. Say there is a marriage ceremony. So there will be a chorus coming with orchestra, musical instruments, playing musical instruments, singing and dancing. They would provide the entertainment to the characters and to the audience, and when the scene is over, they would go. They would not come to fill the gap in between, right? So in that manner, their role or their importance is reduced. And who was the chief writer of new comedy? The chief writer was Meander. He introduced this particular phase of new comedy in his works in about 320 BC. His works are known to us through the Roman playwrights Plautus and Terence. Plautus and Terence are also the best Roman comedy writers, and in fact we also have the influence of these two Roman playwrights on English comedies. And it was new comedy that influenced the European dramas down to the 18th century. So family love and family relationship, which is the major theme of the new comedy plays in the Greeks. The same you find mostly in Shakespeare's dramas. You take any of Shakespeare's comedies, say for instance Merry Wives of Windsor. Say for instance it is The Taming of the Shrew. Say for instance A Midsummer Night's Dream. Then all these plays, they have As You Like It, say for instance, romantic comedy. All these plays have a love triangle. There is a girl, there is a heroine, and there are two lovers. And the girl will win the heart of the one who is morally right, who is genuine in love, right? So this kind of love triangle, and because the boy secretly loves the girl, so there is a conflict between father and son, or conflict between father and daughter, so on and so forth. Sometimes also a class divide issue is involved. So these various subject matters or these various issues you find in Shakespeare's plays as well. So new comedy was the major influence on the English dramas or European dramas till then. And we have a fine quotation by George Meredith. He writes in his essay on comedy, "One excellent test of the civilization of a country I take to be the flourishing of the comic idea and comedy. And the test of true comedy is that it shall awaken thoughtful laughter." Remember, in my introductory class, I said that comedy is not a child's play. It requires a hard labor. It requires a serious mind, though it is a performance, though it is a play full of fun and laughter. And it requires a different kind of sensibility to understand it. That's why it is written that it shall awaken thoughtful laughter. And with reference to Charlie Chaplin, I had talked about this particular point. And Lord Byron, in his work Don Juan, says, "All tragedies are finished by a death, all comedies are ended by a marriage." Please remember these two quotations. George Meredith's quotation you can write in your assignment, in your exam. And Lord Byron's quote can be asked in the MCQ. This also you can quote in your assignments. So with this, our first topic of origin and development of comedy with reference to Greek comedy in particular comes to an end. But this is not the end. As we said just some time before, that new comedy influenced the European dramas down to the 18th century. So now we have to discuss how the comedies developed in England, the development of English comedies also. We have to begin with the first English comedy, Ralph Roister Doister by Nicholas Udall. And then we come to Gammer Gurdon's Needle. And then we have ripe comedies, mature comedies by William Shakespeare in the 16th century, in the Elizabethan age. And Shakespeare, the great master of dramas, he himself wrote so many types of dramas against so many types of comedies as well. Shakespeare is credited for the writing of tragedies, comedies, tragicomedies, chronicle plays, historical plays, and whatnot. And comedies, then Shakespeare has romantic comedies also. Shakespeare has written satirical comedies also. Even tragicomedy is a type that was penned by, that was given by William Shakespeare. The Merchant of Venice is the best example of tragicomedy. That is in 16th century. We have romantic comedy, satirical comedy. We also have Ben Jonson writing satirical comedies. Every Man in His Humor, Walpole the Fox, The Alchemist. These are satirical comedies by Ben Jonson. And we also have another type of comedy developing in the Elizabethan age, and that is comedy of humors. Now you may ask, "Madam, please define what is romantic comedy and what is satirical comedy, what is comedy of humors." These English types of comedies we are going to discuss in detail. But so far as this topic is concerned, origin and development of comedy, then we must at least mention the names of various English comedies that developed throughout the English period and the major writers who contributed to their development. Alright, so as of now, satirical comedy is given by Shakespeare also. Major credit goes to Ben Jonson, Wolf on the Fox, The Alchemist. Then we have Every Man in His Humor and Every Man Out of His Humor. Again, both by Ben Jonson, talking about the type comedy of humors. This is in the Elizabethan age. Then we come to the Puritan. Then Puritan age does not have any comedy production. Puritan age does not even have the dramatic production. Then we come to Restoration age. In Restoration age you have the Restoration comedy or comedy of manners. Now, why these two titles? What was comedy of manners? Why it was also known as Restoration comedy? All this we shall again discuss when we come to our second topic, types of comedy. Right now, as I said, we are to briefly mention the various English types and the major writers. So in the Restoration age, we have comedy of manners or Restoration comedy, written by William Wycherley, William Congreve, so on and so forth. Then in the 17th century, which was mainly the Romantic age, we have poetry, romantic poetry, nature poems by Wordsworth. Then there is in the late 17th and early 18th century, you do have rise of prose, but that is pamphlets and magazines and novels and all that. Then in the 18th century proper, we have sentimental comedy, followed by anti-sentimental comedy. From the title you can make out that anti-sentimental must be the reaction to sentimental comedy. And then again in the 19th century, there is no drama production. 19th century is predominantly the time when most of the novels were written. We have Virginia Woolf, we have Charles Dickens, we have Macaulay, we have Thomas Hardy, all these. We have George Eliot, all these. Jane Austen also, right? And then in the 20th century again, because of the two world wars in the 20th century, we have absurd theatre. We have comedy that is dealing with the absurdity, and there it all ends. There's various types. 21st century now observes, as we discussed in the beginning, comprehensive understanding of the term comedy. It is not confined to any particular type of performance, and that's why we have now stand-up comedy shows, right? But you need not mention stand-up comedy because it is not considered as such as a literary type. It is only for our knowledge. But we certainly have to discuss up to anti-sentimental comedy. And then in the conclusion you will mention the 20th century types under the influence of the first two world wars, what sort of comedy came to be written. That is now all about our first topic, origin and development of comedy. It is quite extensive, very lengthy, but very, very important to form our grounding in the form comedy, right? Please go through the PPTs and videos properly and prepare them well for your assignment, for your exam and MCQ. See you in the next session. Till then, keep reading. Bye-bye.